Mary Willie Grace Moore was born on December 5, 1898, in a tiny place called Slabtown, Tennessee, just outside the slightly larger town of Jellicoe. Her beginnings were humble, rooted in the American South. Her father, Richard Moore, was a businessman, while her mother, Tessa, nurtured a deep love for music, a passion she undoubtedly passed down to her daughter. From a very young age, it was clear Grace was gifted. Driven by her dream, Grace Moore knew she had to leave Slabtown. Her path led her north, to the bustling, vibrant energy of New York City. Here, she could properly train her voice, hone her craft, and find opportunities. In New York, the competition among aspiring singers was fierce, a constant battle for attention and opportunity in a city teeming with talent. Grace dedicated herself to mastering the technical demands of classical singing under esteemed coaches, spending countless hours practicing scales, perfecting breath control, and studying operatic roles. She absorbed the rich musical culture of the city, attending performances and learning from the established masters. Her initial professional steps weren't immediately in the world of grand opera, which required years of rigorous development. Instead, she found work on Broadway, appearing in popular musical comedies and revues. Shows like Hitchiku of 1920 and Music Box Revue offered valuable stage experience, teaching her timing, delivery, and how to connect with a live audience on a different level than classical performance. These experiences polished her stage presence and introduced her to the demands of professional performance, but the call of grand opera remained paramount, a dream she refused to abandon. She continued her studies, relentlessly pursuing the operatic stage. Her dedication paid off handsomely. In 1928, she achieved a monumental goal, her debut at the prestigious Metropolitan Opera in New York, singing the role of Mimi in Puccini's La Bohème. Stepping onto that stage, one of the world's most hallowed musical grounds, was the culmination of years of relentless work, a dream realized against all odds. This was a defining moment, establishing her as a serious operatic talent. Her success at the Met wasn't just about her voice. Critics and audiences alike were captivated by her youthful energy, her striking beauty, and her charismatic dramatic flair, which brought a fresh perspective to classic roles. She quickly became one of the Met's brightest stars, singing lead roles in canonical operas and building a dedicated following among opera aficionados. It was this success on the opera stage, a world away from the sound stages of California, that first caught the attention of Hollywood. Film studios in the 1930s were always on the lookout for new talent, and a glamorous opera star with a powerful, trained voice was a unique commodity, particularly with the rise of talkie films. Signing with Paramount marked a new chapter, but also a steep learning curve. Film acting was a world away from projecting to the back row of an opera house. It required subtlety, working with cameras and microphones that captured every nuance. Early sound films were still evolving technically, and integrating full, authentic musical performances was a challenge the industry was still figuring out. Grace had to adapt her powerful voice for recording and temper her grand stage gestures for the intimacy of the camera lens. There was also potential skepticism from opera purists who viewed Hollywood as a less serious art form. Her first few films were tests, finding her footing in this new medium and exploring how her unique talents could translate to the screen. Then came One Night of Love in 1934. It was a revelation, a film that not only showcased Grace Moore's talent, but also redefined what a musical film could be. The film was a bold experiment by Columbia Pictures, featuring extended sequences of opera performed live on set and recorded with pioneering sound technology. Grace Moore wasn't just an actress playing a singer, she was an opera star performing opera within a popular movie, allowing millions to hear her breathtaking voice sing excerpts from works like the Mad Scene from Lucia di Lammermoor. The film was a sensation, a massive critical and commercial success that defied expectations. It won Academy Awards for Best Sound Recording and Best Music Score, highlighting the technical achievement of capturing Grace's voice and the operatic performances so effectively. Audiences who might never step foot in an opera house were suddenly exposed to and captivated by classical music presented in a dramatic, accessible narrative. This single film transformed her into a bona fide movie star, proving that opera and Hollywood could not only coexist, but thrive together. Columbia Pictures quickly signed her to a multi-picture deal, eager to capitalize on her unique appeal. Films like Love Me Forever, 1935, allowed her to continue showcasing her voice against romantic backdrops, often featuring original songs alongside opera excerpts. The King Steps Out, 1936, directed by the legendary Joseph von Sternberg, offered a slightly different kind of role, a period piece that showed her versatility as an actress beyond just performing music. Then came When You're in Love, 1937, where she starred opposite a young and handsome Cary Grant. This film included popular songs alongside classical pieces, and her rendition of The Swing Is Here became a hit. It also earned her a second Academy Award nomination for Best Actress, a rare feat for any performer, let alone one primarily known for opera. Grace Moore was a true phenomenon, a global superstar capable of commanding headline roles at the prestigious Metropolitan Opera in New York and major opera houses across Europe, while simultaneously starring in hit Hollywood musicals. This juggling act was incredibly demanding. It meant constant travel across the Atlantic, flying here for a performance in London or Paris, there for a film shoot in California, then back to New York for the Met season. She lived a life perpetually in motion, a testament to her global fame and the relentless pace required to maintain her status as a top-tier performer in two demanding industries. She was a queen of both worlds, a dazzling star whose brilliance seemed unstoppable. While her professional life was a whirlwind of performances, recordings, and film shoots, Grace Moore also found happiness in her personal life. In 1931, she married Spanish actor and film producer Valentin Pereira. They met in France, a romantic setting fitting for the union of two figures from the world of arts and entertainment. Their marriage appeared, on the surface, to be a supportive and loving partnership. Valentin seemed genuinely proud of Grace's extraordinary success and often accompanied her on her travels when possible. However, Grace's career demanded a relentless schedule that few could match. She wasn't just a Hollywood star, she remained a celebrated opera singer, with commitments to major opera houses around the globe. This meant constant international travel, shuttling between North America and Europe, often spending significant time apart from her husband due to conflicting schedules and the sheer impracticality of always being together. The pressure of maintaining two demanding international careers was immense. Rehearsals, performances, filming deadlines, travel. It was a non-stop life that would exhaust most people. While Valentin was part of the entertainment world, his own career didn't reach the stratospheric heights of Grace's, meaning her schedule often dictated their lives. This dynamic, combined with the geographical separation and the constant grind of touring and filming, could put a strain on any relationship, no matter how strong the bond. Publicly, they presented a united front, a glamorous couple navigating the demands of fame with grace. But behind the headlines, their life was one of constant movement, a blur of time zones, airport lounges, and temporary homes. And it was precisely this life of perpetual motion, this need to constantly fly across oceans and continents to fulfill her dazzling career commitments, that would tragically place Grace Moore directly in the path of disaster. A disaster whose true nature, revealed through the cold light of investigation, was far more horrifying than simply calling it an accident. January 26, 1947, Copenhagen, Denmark. A day that would forever be etched in the annals of both aviation history and Hollywood tragedy. Grace Moore, ever on the go, was scheduled to fly from Copenhagen's Kastrup Airport. Her destination, New York, via Amsterdam. She was booked on KLM Royal Dutch Airlines Flight 422. On board with her were 21 other souls, including crew and passengers. Among them, another figure of international prominence, Prince Gustav Adolf of Sweden. father of the current King Carl XVI Gustav. It was a flight carrying significant lives, a seemingly routine leg of travel in a world increasingly connected by air after the war, as transatlantic flight became more common. But this flight would be anything but routine, and the events surrounding its brief, fatal moments hold the key to the mystery of Grace Moore's death, and reveal a truth that is chillingly, profoundly not good. The first, most critical piece of the puzzle, the weather. On that day, Kastrup Airport was gripped by severe winter conditions. Heavy snow was falling continuously, accumulating rapidly on the runways and taxiways. The temperature hovered around the freezing point, a dangerous combination creating a perfect recipe for ice formation on aircraft surfaces and slick conditions on the ground. Visibility was severely poor, limited by the falling snow and low clouds. These were conditions that screamed danger to any experienced aviator or ground crew. Operating any aircraft in such weather presented significant, well-known risks. The aircraft itself was a Douglas DC-3, a legendary workhorse of the sky, famous for its reliability and durability, which had proven itself invaluable during the recent war. However, it was designed in an era predating many modern safety features, particularly those related to flying in severe icing conditions or operating from heavily contaminated runways. Ice buildup on the wings, tail, and control surfaces significantly disrupts the smooth flow of air, reducing lift and increasing drag, the very forces essential for flight. Even a thin layer of frost or snow can have a devastating effect on performance, especially during critical phases like takeoff. Snow and ice on the runway also make achieving takeoff speed incredibly difficult and dangerous, increasing the required distance and the risk of losing directional control. So, here is the heart of the mystery, the question that has lingered for decades. Given these obviously perilous conditions, thick snow falling, ice accumulating, poor visibility, and the known limitations of the aircraft, why did KLM Flight 422 attempt to take off? This is the central question that haunted the memory of this tragedy. The official investigation, conducted swiftly in the aftermath by Danish authorities with international cooperation, provided the technical answers regarding the immediate cause of the crash. But the human element, the combination of factors and decisions that led to that fateful attempt, is where the story becomes truly unsettling, where the solution, the truth behind why it happened, is not good. Reports from the time, and subsequent analyses by aviation experts reviewing the accident report, point to a confluence of issues, a perfect storm of circumstances and human factors. Firstly, there was the undeniable pressure inherent in air travel. While not explicitly stated as a direct order to ignore safety regulations, there's always implicit pressure in the commercial aviation world to maintain schedules, especially for a major international airline like KLM, and doubly so with VIP passengers on board like a world-famous opera star and a European prince. Was the crew subtly influenced by the importance of their passengers or the desire to avoid delays, perhaps feeling a sense of obligation or external pressure, however unspoken, to stick to the timetable despite the deteriorating conditions? While there is no concrete proof that Prince Gustav Adolf or Grace Moore themselves exerted direct pressure, the presence of such high-profile figures is often considered a potential background factor. In incidents where judgment calls in marginal conditions go wrong, a subtle erosion of the pure, unadulterated focus solely on safety. Secondly, and perhaps more critically, was the assessment of the conditions and the subsequent decision-making process by the flight crew, specifically the pilot in command, Captain Hendrik Veenendaal. The official accident report would later conclude, unequivocally, that the crew likely underestimated the severity of the conditions, particularly the cumulative effect of the heavy, wet snow and freezing temperatures on the aircraft's performance and the runway's surface. This wasn't necessarily a reckless disregard for safety, but a tragically flawed judgment call made under challenging circumstances. De-icing procedures for aircraft and runways existed in 1947, but they were far less sophisticated or effective than modern methods. Were these procedures applied correctly? Were they sufficient for the sheer amount of snow and ice present? The investigation suggested that while some de-icing or sweeping of the runway might have occurred, it was likely inadequate for the prevailing conditions. Accumulated snow or ice contamination on the wings, even a seemingly thin layer, is incredibly dangerous during takeoff as it disrupts the airflow needed to generate lift. Similarly, attempting to accelerate a heavy aircraft down a runway covered in snow and ice drastically increases drag and reduces traction, making it harder to reach the necessary takeoff speed and rotate safely. And so, despite the glaring warning signs presented by the weather, KLM Flight 422, carrying its precious cargo of 22 souls, including the famous opera star and the Swedish prince, began its taxi through the heavy snow towards the runway. Witnesses on the ground, airport personnel watching from the terminal or control tower, later described the takeoff roll as unusually slow, sluggish, and visibly struggling. The aircraft lumbered down the snow-covered runway, fighting against the drag of the snow and the lack of traction, desperately trying to build enough speed for takeoff. It finally lifted off the ground, rising into the poor visibility. But immediately it was chillingly clear that something was terribly wrong. The DC-3 failed to gain sufficient altitude. Instead of climbing steadily, it struggled, remaining critically low to the ground, barely clearing the airport boundary. The likely culprit was precisely what the conditions warned against: significant loss of lift due to ice and snow contamination on the wings, combined with insufficient airspeed achieved during the difficult takeoff roll from the contaminated runway. The pilot would have been fighting a losing battle for control, the aircraft responding sluggishly, heavy, and unresponsive due to the aerodynamic degradation in the dense, falling snow. Mere seconds after leaving the ground, disaster struck with brutal, horrifying finality. The aircraft banked sharply to the left at a dangerously low altitude. Accounts suggest its left wing tip struck something near the edge of the airport property, potentially a flagpole, a building, or a large tree. Or perhaps it simply stalled and rolled over due to the critical lack of lift and control at such a low height and speed. Regardless of the precise initial point of contact, the impact with the ground was immediate and catastrophic, happening terrifyingly close to the airport itself. The plane didn't just land hard, it crashed, violently, uncontrollably, nose first into the ground. Upon impact, the fuel tanks ruptured, a common and dreaded consequence of such high-energy crashes. The aircraft was instantly consumed by a raging inferno. Witnessing the scene unfold, the horrifying sight of the plane struggling, banking precariously, and then crashing in a fireball right next to the airport, must have been an unimaginable horror for those watching from the terminal or ground staff. This is where the isn't good part of the solved mystery becomes terrifyingly, gut-wrenchingly real. The crash site was one of utter devastation. The sturdy, dependable DC-3 was not just damaged, it was reduced to a mangled, twisted, burning wreck. There was no recognizable fuselage, no intact cabins, no semblance of an airplane, just shattered metal, scattered debris, and an intense, consuming fire. Rescuers arriving moments later, battling the snow and the heat, were met with a scene of absolute horror and destruction. The intensity of the fire and the sheer force of the impact meant there was no possibility of survival. All 22 people on board perished instantly in the inferno, trapped in the wreckage. Identifying the victims was an incredibly difficult and heartbreaking task for forensic teams due to the state of the remains. A grim testament to the violence of the crash. The elegant, world-renowned Grace Moore, the celebrated voice that had charmed millions, the Hollywood star, was among them, her life ending in a terrifying, fiery instant, reduced to unrecognizable remains alongside her fellow passengers and crew. The conclusion of the investigation, the solution to the mystery of why the plane crashed so quickly and violently after attempting takeoff in bad weather, was grimly straightforward and devoid of sensational conspiracy. It wasn't a bomb, or a mid-air collision far from land, or some unknowable force. The accident was caused by the decision to attempt takeoff in weather conditions that clearly exceeded the aircraft's capabilities and the limits of safe operation, primarily due to insufficient de-icing and significant snow and ice contamination on the runway and wings. This led to a catastrophic loss of lift and control at a critical, low-altitude phase of flight immediately after leaving the ground. Essentially, a tragic combination of severe environmental factors, potentially combined with pressures to maintain schedule, and ultimately, human judgment errors in assessing and mitigating the risks, sealed the fate of everyone aboard. This is precisely why the solved mystery isn't good. It wasn't some elaborate plot, some hidden enemy, some unpredictable mechanical failure unrelated to the conditions, or a sudden, unavoidable act of nature striking a perfectly healthy aircraft during stable flight. It was a chain of events rooted in factors that, in brutal hindsight, scream preventable, and the judgment call to take off in clearly hazardous conditions, the inadequate preparation for the weather, the known limitations of the aircraft in such conditions. These elements contributed to a crash that was not a slow, drawn-out emergency allowing for desperate measures, but a sudden, brutal, instantaneous annihilation mere seconds after leaving the ground. The reality of the crash was a stark contrast to the glamour of her life. No dramatic final moments soaring through the clouds, just a terrifying struggle for control lasting mere seconds, followed by absolute, violent destruction on the cold, snowy ground right next to the airport. This was the brutal truth revealed by the investigation. The mystery wasn't a hidden perpetrator, but a tragic convergence of poor conditions, questionable operational decisions, and the unforgiving physics of flight, resulting in an end that was sudden, horrific, and, for those who analyzed it, deeply, terribly preventable. This is the not good solution, the grim reality behind the headlines. Grace Moore was only 48 years old when her life was so violently cut short. She was not in decline, far from it. She remained at the very peak of her powers, commanding stages and captivating audiences worldwide. Her schedule in the months leading up to January 1947 reflected her immense popularity and enduring talent, constant performances, international travel, future plans in both opera and potentially film. Her death on January 26, 1947, was a shock felt around the globe. The news spread quickly, first reporting a plane crash near Copenhagen, then confirming the devastating loss of all souls aboard, including the beloved opera star and the Swedish prince. The sheer suddenness and brutality of the event were difficult for the public to comprehend. A vibrant life, so full of music and light, extinguished in such a horrifying manner. Her remains, tragically, had to be identified amidst the wreckage, a grim task reflecting the violence of the impact and subsequent fire. Her body was later returned to the United States. She was laid to rest in her home state of Tennessee, buried at Forest Hill Cemetery in Chattanooga. Near her roots, tributes poured in from the worlds of opera, film, and even from heads of state, mourning the loss of a unique talent and a beloved personality. Her passing marked not a gentle fading away after a long life, but a violent, abrupt, and deeply tragic end to a life still vibrant and full of potential. Grace Moore left behind an incredible legacy that endures to this day. She was a true pioneer, successfully bridging the gap between the seemingly disparate worlds of opera and Hollywood, demonstrating that a powerful voice and dramatic talent could shine on any stage, any screen. She helped bring classical music to a wider audience and inspired countless singers and performers who followed, proving that artistic boundaries could be broken. But her story is forever intertwined with the tragedy of her death. The mystery of that day on the snowy runway in Copenhagen, now understood through the cold, technical analysis of accident investigators and the examination of human factors, reveals a truth that, while solving the how the plane crashed, only deepens the sadness of the why it had to happen. It wasn't the stuff of dramatic movie plots. No hidden villain or grand conspiracy, but the grim reality of human vulnerability to nature's fury and the devastating consequences of errors in judgment made under pressure. Grace Moore's life was a testament to talent, ambition, and glamour. Her death is a stark, somber reminder that even the brightest stars are subject to the unpredictable, sometimes brutal, forces of reality, and that the secrets uncovered are not always the sensational kind, but the profoundly tragic ones hidden in the details of a preventable end. Her voice may have been silenced that day, but her story continues to echo as a poignant and cautionary chapter in the complex, often shadowed history of Hollywood's golden age and the dawn of commercial air travel.